Okay, we are back to Module 3, where we will explore how to teach intentional communication. So let's get started with developing communicative intent. You should have downloaded this resource to get you started. This progress monitoring checklist provides a format for you to document the student's progress in developing intentional communication. It begins with identifying potential behaviors the student exhibits. It provides an informal assessment of student behaviors and identified learning targets. It also outlines the intervention to build intentionality, whether it's movements and gestures or switch activation. The checklist identifies possible IEP goals for developing intentional communication. And then at the end, there are some fun cause and effect activities with switch activation. The first step is to start by observing the student's natural movements that could be used to establish cause and effect. You can find a list of possible movements to indicate intentional communication in the progress monitoring checklist. Students may use eye gaze by looking at the communication partner or the object. The eye gaze may be accompanied by facial expressions or vocalizations. Some students may turn their face or their head either towards or away from the communication partner or the object. These may also be accompanied by vocalizations. And then there are some students who vocalize. They produce sounds like grunting, babbling, laughing, crying. These sounds could be directed toward a communication partner or an object. And then there are facial expressions, smiling, frowning toward the communication partner or object. You may observe physical actions like moving the upper or lower extremities. Maybe the student is reaching for or pushing away from a communication partner or object. And then body posturing. They may be physically turning their body either towards or away from a communication partner or object. You may be wondering how to know whether the behavior is intentional or not. When observing the behavior, do you notice any changes in the magnitude or rate of the behavior? Does the student demonstrate the behavior with more vigor or at a faster pace? Also, the behaviors should occur more often within social interactions than in other situations. Intentional behaviors should occur along with a communication partner rather than when the student is alone in his room. Let's think about Amos. The team notices some natural movements. Amos jerks his left hand upwards and then lets it fall back down. He also shifts his eyes left to right. The team is ready to create a plan for consistent intervention by conducting an informal assessment. The assessment consists of identifying the movement, investigating what happens before the movement, and what happens after the movement, the consequence. The team is also looking for evidence of intentionality. Let's look at each of the steps of intervention planning within the natural environment. You conduct this assessment through observation. Number 1, determine behaviors. In looking at Amos, the team is starting with the hand that jerks upwards. Number 2, determine situations that precede the behaviors. The team determined situations that preceded the behaviors. They felt it was a startle response when someone starts talking to him or when bright lights are turned on. Number 3, determine the communication partner's responses to the behaviors. What did the partners do when they saw this behavior? For some communication partners, the movement went unnoticed. One responded, "Yes, it's Nurse Sandy." Others interpreted the hand raising as waving. Still others interpreted the behavior as the lights being too bright. Consider whether staff are using these responses consistently. Should you bring them up to the caregiver's attention? And then, number 4, look for evidence of intentionality. So once parents, caregivers respond, do they notice changes in the magnitude and rate of the behavior? Do they notice an increase in the occurrence of the behavior when people are around? And additional evidence of intentionality includes persistence of the behavior until the goal is achieved. Amos may continue to raise his hand until you say something to him. He may drop his hand once you start talking to him. Or maybe Amos will try something different to reach the goal if lifting his hand is not successful. Maybe he would start moving his eyes left or right. And if the behavior does not get him what he wants, Amos may increase or decrease the intensity of lifting his hands. Any of these signs let you know he is beginning to get intentionality. So now that you have the movement and the possible meaning behind it, you can teach communicative intent via cause and effect. First, establish routines focused on motivating activities. Routines must have a clear structure that's repeated in the same manner each time. Examples include songs with actions associated with them, like Wheels on the Bus, feeding, or giving high fives. Now that you've established a routine, you go ahead and initiate the interaction. Sing the first 2 lines of the song. Feed the student 2 spoonfuls, or put your hand up for a high five. You've initiated the interaction. Then you pause and wait expectantly. This provides the opportunity for the student to respond. And just remember that you may need longer pause times for students with severe motor or cognitive challenges, or if they're learning a new routine. The next step is to watch carefully for a signal or a movement. You would want to have natural movements that are tied to the activity if possible. So if it's getting picked up, the movement would be raising the arms. If the routine is feeding, the movement would probably be opening the mouth. If it's high five, the movement would be lifting up the hand. However, if the student has significant motor impairments like Amos, they may rely heavily on eye gaze, facial expression, or other subtle behaviors. Once you observe a movement, respond immediately to the signal as if it were intentional. Identify and label the movement. Model it. State the meaning, and then go ahead and fulfill the intent. Then repeat this sequence in the same way. Do it over and over and over again so the student learns it. So what does it mean to identify and label the movement? It's pretty much the same thing as identifying and attributing meaning that we've been talking about as a strategy for teaching communication. It's important to attribute meaning to a behavior to help the student understand his movement is something he can do to get people to do things. Who doesn't want some control in their environment? So you clearly tell him what he did, what you observed. Model the movement and state the meaning. If it's acceptance, you could indicate words like want, like, or more. If the meaning is rejection, you could model don't want, don't like, all done. And in the end, just fulfill the meaning, whatever it is. Any need for a yes/no response? Hopefully you are shaking your head no, a natural movement for no. Let's try identifying and attributing meaning to a reflexive movement. You massage lotion on Tanya's arm. She startles and grimaces. What is her movement? I'm sure you're thinking startling and grimacing or making a face. So what is she indicating to you? Acceptance or rejection? It looks like rejection to me. So you can say, you startled and made a face. You don't like that. Let's look at another reflexive movement. You play a few minutes of rock music and Joe smiles faintly. What is the movement? Joe smiles. So what is he indicating to you? Acceptance or rejection? I'd go with acceptance. You smiled. You like that. Let's run through that sequence with Amos. The team determined Amos likes when people come talk to him, and they established a consistent routine for everyone to follow. They decided everyone would say, "Hi, Amos, it's Nurse Sandy," or whoever it is. Then they pause and wait expectantly. Waiting is hard, so at least count to 10 or so. The team then watched carefully for a signal. See if Amos raises his hand. Then they respond immediately to the signal as if it were intentional. They tell him what he did, raise their own hand, and attribute meaning to it. They shape this reflexive movement into an intentional behavior, a form of communication. Then the team repeats the sequence as often as they can throughout the day. The team thinks about who else in the school, the facility, the home can work on teaching communicative intent when they come up to Amos. He's going to need hundreds of opportunities to get the idea of making others do what he wants. Let's look at Javier, another example. Javier's team determined he probably likes country music because he seems to stir and move his head back and forth slightly when it is played. The team plays the music for 20 seconds or so and then turns it off. They pause and wait expectantly. The team watches carefully for a signal or a movement. Does he stir and move his head back and forth at all? When he does stir, they respond immediately to the signal as if it were intentional. You moved your head. They move their head back and forth too. They attribute meaning by saying, "You want more music? Here we go." So again, they are shaping a movement into an intentional behavior, a form of communication. Repeat the sequence. Who else can work with Javier? Think about how many opportunities he might need to learn intentionality. Some students require hundreds or thousands of opportunities to learn intentionality. Our most complex communicators need consistency, which leads to anticipation. Complete the steps of the routine in exactly the same way each time. The emergent communicator then begins to anticipate what happens next. Make sure the team continues to recognize movements and their intents. Recognize different movements and assign meaning to them. We want to teach them as much communication as possible. Once your student demonstrates a few behaviors used for communication, you can make a signal dictionary or a gesture dictionary so that others in the environment can interpret the signals. Here's just one example. How can this be helpful? Well, it increases consistency among caregivers, making it easier for the student to learn cause and effect. And it gets the student's needs met more quickly. What can you do with this dictionary? You can post it in the student's environment. Okay, let's stop here and complete a Nearpod activity, matching pairs.